Hey, God bless you, everyone. Welcome back to Revive Media. I'm Pastor Izzy. Today, I want to share with you some quick thoughts on promises. Promises in the Bible are something that are meant from God to His people. But sometimes there's some complexities involved with the promises. I want to take us back to Exodus 6:6, where we find God's people still enslaved, still in Egypt, but God gives them a promise. And God gives them a promise to not just take them out of enslavement, not just to take them out of Egypt, but to deliver them into the promised land, the land that flows milk and honey, the land that they will grow and be blessed in. And God promises to deliver them out of Egypt and deliver them into the promised land. However, there were some logistical problems here. And the Israelites, they were looking at Moses and they're confused because they know that there's some logistical problems. First off, they're still slaves. So God's given them this promise, but they're still slaves. How's He going to get them out of that? Then secondly, they're not warriors. So even if they wanted to fight their way out, they weren't warriors anymore. For 400 years, they've been enslaved. They don't know how to set up a military operation to get themselves free. Then thirdly, they had no possessions of their own. So even if they escaped Egypt, they would just die in the wilderness because they had nothing. They had no gold, no silver. They had no carriages. They had no animals that they owned. Everything belongs to the Egyptians. And then fourthly, they didn't know how to survive. They didn't know how to survive in the wilderness. They didn't know how to, and they wouldn't have time to set up a farm and grow some crops and do all that because the Egyptians would just come after them and kill them. So there were some serious logistical issues that they were aware of. Moses was aware of them, but they didn't think that God was aware of them. And it's not that God wasn't aware of them. It was just that those things didn't matter to God. God gave them a promise. But what He didn't do was tell them how He would deliver that promise. Well, in our life, God has given us promises, right? And we have to understand that context. But this is the thing. God gives us a promise, but He doesn't tell us how He's going to deliver that promise. And that, I believe, is what we struggle with a lot. We want God to deliver His promises our way. And that doesn't work. If you want a promise from God in your life to be fulfilled, then you have to allow God to be God and to fulfill that promise in the way that only God could. So going back to the Israelites, we see that God addresses all of these logistical human issues, but He does it in His way. So the Israelites were still slaves. God sends in these 10 plagues that caused the Egyptians, like I said earlier, to push them out, to urge them to leave. But they wanted them to leave so much, so badly, that they were willing to let the Israelites take whatever the Egyptians had, just take whatever you want. And the Bible tells us that the Israelites pillaged the village. They pillaged the nation. They took everything that they could. They took carts and cattle and sheep and places to carry things on, because now God was fulfilling another part of their logistical concern, which is the fact that they had no possessions. They had no possessions of their own, but yet they were able to make a calf out of gold in the wilderness. How did that come about? Where did they get that gold? They got that gold from the Egyptians. The Egyptians gave them everything: silver, gold, food, clothing, animals, transportation, whatever they wanted, just to get rid of them. So now God has solved two of their problems, two of their excuses for why they couldn't fulfill the promise that God had given them. And so now God has to deal with another issue, which is with the fact that if they get to the promised land, what about the Egyptians coming back after them? So what happens? God brings them to the Red Sea. They are there facing this opposition now because they're stuck between the sea, and they hear that the army of Pharaoh is coming after them. And God tells them, just have faith. I've got a plan for this. Why did you doubt, in a sense, is what he's asking them. Why are you so concerned with this? So now he tells them, hey, just walk through the water. God parts the water, and it says that they walked on dry land. You know what's amazing about that? If God hadn't made the land completely dry, then the wagons that were carrying all of the possessions that they got from the Egyptians would have been stuck. And then that blessing would have just stayed right there. So the land had to be completely dry for them to get the animals and the wagons across to the other side. And what happened? Now their enemy comes through, sees them cross. The enemy comes through after them, and God closes the sea back on top of them, completely nullifying and eliminating their enemy. So now there is no threat that their past is going to come back after them. In your life, in your search for God's promises and for where God has told you that he's going to deliver you, listen, God's going to put you in some uncomfortable situations. You are going to have to face some challenges, but just know that you're not alone there. If God brought you to it, he will get you through it. In these situations, God will provide a way out and a way to close up the mouth of your enemy, those that would come after you, those that want to do you harm. God will close in on them and effectively eliminate that threat. You just got to trust God and let God do it his way. Let him do it the way that only God could do it. And so then God addresses the issue that they don't know how to survive in the wilderness. They don't know how to build shelters that would last, and they're wandering around in the desert. So they don't have time to make farms, and they don't have time to set up tents and build a city and all this stuff. So they're nomadic. So you know what God does? He provides a column of smoke during the day to block the sun, to keep the heat off their back, and a column of fire by night that would lead them and guide them and keep them warm. And the entire camp would encamp around this column, this pillar of fire, so that everyone would be warm. And it would shoo off anything that would try to creep in and hurt them. Well, they're out there and they don't have time to plant. They don't have time to grow food. Where are they going to get food from? So God sends quail, and he sends manna that would appear on the ground every morning. This mystical looking bread, this weird thing. But it kept them fed for 40 years in the desert. The birds and the bread kept them fed for 40 years in the desert. And you know when it stopped? It stopped the minute they got to a place where now they could eat off the food that was growing off the land. So the minute they were able to eat from the fruit of the vegetation that was in the land, that's when the blessing from heaven stopped, and God shifted his promise to provide for them. It shifted from God providing for them miraculously to God providing them by giving them this land that now they could work and they could grow and work the soil and work the vegetation and have the animals grow and work alongside them. And now they could feed themselves because he had delivered them into the promised land. So what am I telling you in all this? What I'm telling you is that our faith in God needs to be that faith that I'm going to trust in your promise, God, but I'm going to trust also in the way that you're going to deliver your promise. I'm not going to question the way that you deliver your promise. I'm not going to rush the way that you deliver your promise. And I'm not going to dictate the way that you deliver your promise. Because after all, you are God and I am merely a human. but I am your child and you love me. So I know that whatever you're doing is going to work out for my good. This is the lesson that we learn, and it is all over the Bible. God makes a promise to his people. He keeps the promise, but he doesn't tell them how he's going to keep the promise. He promises them a savior, a Messiah, but he doesn't tell them how the Messiah is going to come, what he's going to look like. He promises them salvation, but it's not the salvation that they think that they need. See, if we don't allow God to be God in our life, and we start trying to nitpick and dictate how he operates, we're going to miss out on the bigger blessing. We're going to miss out on the larger salvation. We're not just going to miss out on miracles, but we're going to miss out on his providence, because sometimes God will provide through miracles, but all of a sudden that promise will shift into a responsibility, because when God gives you the ability, it's because he's also laying on you the responsibility to provide, to now work, to now do your best and do your excellent work as unto the Lord, that whatever you do with your hands, do in excellence for God. It's an ability that comes with a responsibility. So God's promises don't stop. They might shift in the delivery method, where God delivered by miracle, but now he delivers in ability. So I hope this helps you understand how God's promises work, so that you can look in your life and you can look around and you could see how God has been providing for you. And you could see that many of the things that you might have thought was some sort of confrontation or some sort of thing that put you in a bad place was God putting you in a situation to eliminate the threat to your life, or to help provide you with the skills that you would need to then later on be able to continue to fulfill the promise that God gave you. But now you don't need a miracle, because now he's given you the ability. God's promises are for you and they're for me. However, we cannot dictate how those promises come about. That is also for God to do. I hope that this brings some sort of peace to your life, to the things that are going on around you, and some clarity as to how God works with his promises. This is all in the Bible. All you have to do is open it up and read it, and you'll see what I'm saying. You will understand what it is that I'm talking about. If you have any questions, any comments, any concern, feel free to hit me up, and you can leave a comment down there. Please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. God bless you.